What happens when the woman who stood for everyone suddenly has no one standing for her? She was once the face of strength, beauty, and box office gold. In the late 90s, Ashley Judd ruled Hollywood with roles that blended fierce intelligence and emotional depth. Double Jeopardy, Kiss the Girls, High Crimes. To millions, she wasn't just an actress, she was America's thinking woman's icon. But behind the red carpets, the interviews, and the camera-ready smiles was a woman fighting battles most never saw. Today, Ashley Judd lives away from the spotlight. Not because she lost relevance, but because she lost almost everything that defined her. Her voice became one of the loudest in the Me Too movement, but it came at a price. She stood up against one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, and while the world applauded, parts of her were quietly being dismantled. Then the tragedy hit home. Her mother, country music legend Naomi Judd, took her own life, and it was Ashley who found her body. A moment so intimate, so devastating, it rewrote her soul. This is not just a story about fame and downfall. This is the story of how a woman built herself twice, once for the world and once again when the world stopped looking. Because some legacies aren't sung out loud, some pain doesn't trend, and some women rise quietly, carrying not their names, but their truth. She grew up in the shadow of fame, but no one saw the cracks forming beneath. She grew up in the shadow of fame, but no one saw the cracks forming beneath. Ashley Judd was born into music royalty, the youngest daughter of Naomi Judd and half-sister to Winona, one of country music's biggest voices. But unlike the stage-lit world her family inhabited, Ashley's childhood was filled with more shadows than spotlights. She wasn't raised in Hollywood, she was raised in chaos. Her mother Naomi battled severe depression, and the family moved more than a dozen times before Ashley even turned 18. There were long stretches of loneliness, instability, and silence. And while her sister was performing on stages, Ashley was often left to parent herself. In her 2011 memoir, All That Is Bitter and Sweet, Ashley peeled back the curtain. She spoke of emotional neglect, of being left alone for days, of sexual abuse at the hands of strangers, while her family was unaware, not for pity, but for truth. Because even girls born into fame can be forgotten in their own homes. She attended 13 schools in 12 years. She excelled academically, often the smartest person in the room, but never quite the happiest. The pressure to be fine, to be perfect, was a mask she wore long before she ever became an actress. College became her escape. Ashley earned a degree from the University of Kentucky, later studied at Harvard's Kennedy School. But behind every achievement was a silent scream for stability. By her early 20s, she had the beauty of a leading lady, the brain of a scholar, and the pain of a woman twice her age. She stepped into acting not just to be seen, but to finally be heard. Every role she took on, every line she delivered, was more than performance. It was a translation of wounds into art. And for a while, the world listened. She didn't just act. She confronted, she haunted, she stayed. When Ashley Judd arrived in Hollywood, it didn't take long for casting directors to notice. There was something different about her, not just the poised beauty, but the weight behind her eyes. She didn't pretend to feel, she remembered. Her breakout role in Ruby in Paradise, 1993, didn't scream for attention, it whispered. But the whisper cut deep. It earned her critical acclaim and a Sundance Grand Jury Prize. Suddenly, Ashley Judd was everywhere, not as a tabloid name, but as a serious actress. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, she became a force. Heat, A Time to Kill, Kiss the Girls, Double Jeopardy, High Crimes. She wasn't the damsel, she wasn't the seductress, she was the survivor, the woman who fought back. On screen, she hunted serial killers, took down corrupt governments, outwitted her enemies. Off screen, she graced magazine covers, red carpets, political events. She was elegant, educated, electric. And for a while, America believed she could do no wrong. But what the audience didn't see was how deeply those roles mirrored her private war with trauma, with silence, with legacy. Each scene, each breakdown, each scream wasn't just performance, it was release. She once said, "I didn't become an actress to be famous. I became an actress because I had things inside me that needed to be spoken." And she spoke. Through every courtroom thriller, every teardrop monologue. But Hollywood has rules, and when a woman speaks too loud for too long, the machine starts to push her out. What no one knew was that while Ashley was saving lives on screen, off screen, she was about to be forced into the fight of her life. She stood up for the truth, and the industry turned away. In 2017, Ashley Judd stepped forward with a truth she had carried for over 2 decades. She was one of the first women to publicly accuse Harvey Weinstein, the once untouchable producer who ruled over Hollywood with fear, charm, and unchecked power. Ashley had been in her 20s when he invited her to his hotel suite under the guise of career talk. Instead, she was met with manipulation, pressure, and a door that locked behind her. She escaped, but the cost came later, in roles lost, scripts that never came, directors who suddenly went silent. Years later, when the New York Times began piecing together a pattern of abuse, it was Ashley's voice, steady, unshaken, that ignited the movement. Me Too became a global reckoning. But while the world applauded, she lost work. Hollywood is a machine that rewards silence, and she had broken it. And then another tragedy. In 2022, Naomi Judd, her mother, a country music icon, died by suicide. Ashley was the one who found her. It wasn't just a loss, it was a shattering. For years, their relationship had been complex, love braided with wounds, closeness tangled with pain. And now the questions would never be answered. Only silence remained. Ashley withdrew from Hollywood almost entirely. She went to therapy. She traveled with humanitarian missions. She spoke at UN panels about gender-based violence. But the big screen no longer called. Some headlines called it a career decline, but for Ashley, it was something else. Healing isn't glamorous, it's messy, it's painful, and it's mine. She had been the face of thrillers, of courtroom vengeance, but now she faced the greatest plot twist of her life, rebuilding a self that fame could never protect. Was it really success, or just a well-lit performance of survival? She disappeared from the screen, but that's where she finally began to live. After the whirlwind, the roles, the headlines, the movements, Ashley Judd vanished. No red carpets, no press tours, no Hollywood. She retreated to the quiet corners of the world, the Congo, Sierra Leone, refugee camps, women's shelters, not for escape, but for connection. There, surrounded by women whose pain had no microphone, Ashley listened. She didn't arrive as a star, she arrived as a survivor among survivors. She spoke at the UN, she advocated for gender justice, health equity, and dignity for women in crisis. Her name faded from entertainment news, but it rose in halls of impact. Still back home, the grief lingered. Losing her mother wasn't a chapter, it was a collapse. And grief, when tangled with a lifetime of unresolved wounds, doesn't pass. It settles. She once said in a quiet interview, "There are days I don't get out of bed, but there are also days I walk into the world and remember who I am." Ashley Judd aged out of the system that once adored her. Hollywood had moved on, but she didn't ask for it back. She didn't want to come back because she never truly left herself. She learned to be at peace with the mirror, cellulite, wrinkles, grief lines and all. In a world obsessed with youth, Ashley became a woman who aged, out loud, on her terms. No cosmetic rebranding, no publicist reimagining, just a woman who had once been a girl left alone in motel rooms, a woman who had once screamed her truth into courtrooms, a woman who now sat still and healed. Her fame had quieted, but her voice, that low, unwavering, truth-soaked voice, still echoes. Not all legacies are loud, some live in silence and strength. Ashley Judd may never headline another blockbuster, she may never return to the red carpets she once ruled, and yet her presence has never been more meaningful. She showed the world that survival isn't linear, that trauma doesn't end when the credits roll, that healing is slow, uncomfortable, and sacred. In an industry obsessed with reinvention, Ashley chose transparency over transformation. She didn't chase a comeback. She didn't seek rebranding. Instead, she chose to grow older in public without apology, showing millions of women that there is life, power, and dignity beyond the frame. Her activism reached places her films never could. In refugee camps, in courtrooms, in policy halls, her voice fought for the voiceless. She turned pain into purpose and silence into change. More than an actress, more than a survivor, Ashley Judd became a mirror, reflecting back a truth many were too afraid to say. You can lose everything and still be whole. She didn't leave behind a string of trophies or tabloid covers. She left behind something rarer, a blueprint for how to rise when the world forgets your name. And maybe that's her greatest role, not the woman who ran from danger on screen, but the woman who stood still in real life and said, I'm still here. So the next time you hear Double Jeopardy playing late at night, or see her face on a dusty DVD cover at the thrift store, remember, she wasn't just acting, she was surviving, testifying, transforming. And her story, quiet, battered, unfinished, is still unfolding inside the women who see themselves in her. If Ashley's story moved you, leave a comment below. Let's honor the women who rise, even when no one is watching. Hit like, share this story, and subscribe for more forgotten voices worth remembering. Whose story do you think deserves to be told next? We're listening.